June 1st, 2014, Camborne, Cornwall. A quiet terraced house stood still at dawn, hiding a horror unfolding behind its thin walls. Inside, a vulnerable pensioner's home had been overtaken, not by strangers in the night, but by the very people he once allowed through his door. A woman with a blank expression and a heavy past, Michelle Casterton, once just another face in the community, now stood at the center of one of Cornwall's most disturbing torture murders. How could a simple act of kindness turn into such unimaginable brutality? This was not a sudden outburst of anger, but a prolonged campaign of domination, humiliation, and violence. Inside Devon Cornwall's most notorious killers, the case of Michelle Casterton. Welcome to UK Real Crime, where Cornwall's quiet streets whisper the darkest truths, and its most dangerous offenders are finally unmasked. Today, we uncover the shocking murder of Terry Oldham, tracing how exploitation, cruelty, and indifference built the foundation of a crime that stunned an entire county. What you're about to hear may stay with you long after the story ends. First offender, Michelle Casterton, 44 years old. June 1st, 2014, Camborne, Cornwall. A quiet terraced home hid a level of cruelty few could imagine. What began as an informal living arrangement would unravel into one of Cornwall's most disturbing murder cases. Michelle Casterton, 44 at conviction, lived in the house with her partner, Aaron Mallon, and their associate, Daniel Quinn. Their victim, 63-year-old Terry Oldham, was a vulnerable pensioner whose home and life the trio gradually took over. What followed was not a momentary outburst but a sustained pattern of exploitation. Mr. Oldham was forced from his own bedroom to sleep on the sofa, while his belongings were sold to cover drug debts. The abuse escalated sharply after the trio discovered Mr. Oldham had a past conviction for child sexual offenses. Believing him fair game, they launched a brutal assault. In the hours that followed, the group subjected him to a violent sexual attack with a broom handle. The injuries were catastrophic: deep internal damage, severe bruising, fractured ribs, and broken fingers. Moreover, they urinated on him, bullying him, and force-feeding him dog feces. Mr. Oldham lay in agony on the floor for 24 hours, but no one called for help. Instead, the housemates carried on, stepping over him, ignoring what had become a medical emergency. He died where he lay. Afterwards, the trio attempted to clean the scene, wash his body, and cut his hair to remove evidence. Mallon was even recorded laughing, saying, "Ding dong, the nonce is dead." Police discovered the body on April 1st, 2014. What followed was an unusually long and difficult investigation. The house was known for drug use and antisocial behavior, making reliable witness statements hard to secure. Over 8 months, detectives gathered accounts from people who had seen earlier abuse, but were initially reluctant to speak. Medical evidence later revealed the full extent of the injuries, confirming the fatal sexual assault. Witnesses later described the group behaving like a pack of dogs. In November 2015, after a lengthy trial at Truro Crown Court, Casterton, Mallon, and Quinn were all convicted of murder. Casterton was also found guilty of allowing the death of a vulnerable adult. She received a life sentence with a minimum term of 22 years. In 2017, her appeal was rejected. She has maintained her innocence from prison. The case drew strong public condemnation, particularly due to the prolonged cruelty and the group's refusal to seek help for a dying man. It raised uncomfortable questions about how easily vulnerable adults can be isolated, controlled, and abused behind closed doors. As we step back from the details, 3 clear warnings emerge. Abusers often start with control, not violence. Financial dependence and isolation are early red flags. A vulnerable person surrounded by individuals with substance-related debts or instability faces heightened risk. When someone's dignity is routinely mocked or dismissed, escalation to physical harm becomes far more likely. In the end, this case reminds us how silent cruelty can grow when no one pays attention, and how vigilance may save a life. Second offender, Karen Pedley, 41 years old. November 15th, 2008, Truro, Cornwall. Sometimes, a tragedy begins long before the moment it explodes into public view. Karen Pedley, a 43-year-old care home worker from Carharrack, working at Rosewyn House, she was responsible for the well-being of vulnerable elderly residents. Among them was 96-year-old Gladys Rowe, a woman who depended entirely on staff for care and protection. The events that led to Mrs. Rowe's death began with Pedley's long-standing fascination with fire. As a child of 10, she had once saved her family from a house fire and was publicly praised as a hero, even flown on Concorde as a reward. This experience created a distorted sense of heroism, that fueled a prolonged pattern of arson. On the night of the fatal incident, Pedley entered the bedroom shared by Mrs. Rawle and her roommate, Joan Olive Ray. She used a lighter to ignite the curtains, having earlier damaged electrical cabling to make the blaze resemble an accidental fault. She then walked away, heading downstairs to prepare for bed. The fire alarms did not sound for nearly half an hour, and by the time help arrived, Mrs. Rawle had suffered fatal smoke inhalation. She died in hospital, while her roommate survived. Detectives faced a complex investigation. The fire had occurred in 2008, yet Pedley was not charged until February 2015. Over those intervening years, investigators linked her to a broader 8-year period of suspected arson. A search of her home revealed newspaper clippings celebrating her childhood rescue and Concorde flight evidence, the prosecution said, reflected her ongoing obsession. At Truro Crown Court in October 2016, the full pattern of events became clear. Pedley was found guilty of the murder of Mrs. Rawle, along with 12 counts of arson. She also admitted setting fire to her prison cell while on remand. Although her defense argued she never meant to kill and had tried to help residents escape, the jury concluded the evidence showed deliberate endangerment and a repeated disregard for risk. The sentencing judge imposed 14 life sentences, ordering a minimum term of 27 years. He emphasized that the public needed protection, noting that Pedley continued to start fires even after an elderly woman had died. Her conviction sparked strong local concern, particularly within the care sector, where trust between families and workers is essential. While the case did not lead to national policy shifts, it intensified questions about safeguarding and the early detection of dangerous behavior within care facilities. Today, Karen Pedley remains in prison, still serving her life term. The memory of Gladys Rowe's death lingers, an elderly woman lost not through neglect or accident, but through intentional harm inflicted by someone entrusted with her care. In the end, this case forces us to confront how easily trust can be misused when no one expects danger to come from within. Third offender, Faye Burford, 41 years old. February the 23rd, 2019, Paignton, Devon. Sometimes the smallest refusal can ignite consequences no one imagines. Faye Burford, a 41-year-old woman battling long-term addiction, lived in a second-floor flat of a converted Edwardian villa. Her life had been shaped by an £80-a-day cocaine habit, debts, and a history of crime stretching back to adolescence. She was known for her fascination with violent stories, keeping 27 true crime magazines and writing poetry about murder. Downstairs lived her neighbor and friend, 74-year-old Peter Flux, a gentle Buddhist elder who had previously helped her with small loans. On the afternoon of that February day, Burford, already under the influence of cocaine, went to Mr. Flux's flat to ask for £20. When he declined, she picked up a knife and launched a sustained attack. Mr. Flux suffered multiple stab wounds, including injuries to his face and arms as he tried to defend himself. The fatal blow was a deep wound to his neck that severed his carotid artery. After he collapsed, Burford quickly searched his flat, stole roughly £70 in cash, along with his passport, and returned upstairs. Within 8 hours, she used his passport details to apply for a Capital One credit card she planned to intercept from the post. She disposed of the knife, wallet, and blood-stained clothes in outside bins. Over the next 2 days, she told several friends she had killed someone, but none believed her, assuming it was another drug-induced outburst. Mr. Flux's body was finally discovered on February the 27th, when a concerned friend contacted police. Detectives from the Major Crime Investigation Team launched a detailed inquiry. They recovered the discarded knife and clothing from a nearby bin and uncovered her credit card application using the victim's details. Inside her flat, investigators found her collection of true crime magazines, one marked at a page describing a similar killing. Burford was arrested the same day the body was found. She reportedly told police, "I have been off my head for so long, it all seems unreal," expressing confusion but not remorse. At Exeter Crown Court, she pleaded guilty to murder, leading to a sentencing hearing focused on the facts of the case. The judge rejected her claims of self-defense, calling them wicked and calculating lies, noting there was not one scintilla of genuine remorse. She received a life sentence with a minimum term of 21 years and 1 month. The violence of the attack and her actions afterward left Mr. Flux's family devastated. They described the killing as traumatizing and said the thought of his final moments would haunt us for the rest of our lives. In the end, this case underscores how desperation, left unchecked, can destroy not only one life, but an entire community's sense of safety. Fourth offender, Christine Rawle, 69 years old. August the 21st, 2022, Braunton, Devon. Sometimes a single argument reveals years of strain no one else ever saw. Christine Rawle, a 70-year-old horse expert and self-described hypnotherapist, lived with her husband, 72-year-old Ian Rawle, on an £800,000 smallholding they had shared for nearly 3 decades. Their marriage, marked by mutual hostility and long-running disputes, had drawn police involvement before. On that August morning, Christine sent a text message saying, "I hope the man dies," a sign of the tensions that had grown around their argument over selling a piece of land on their property. The dispute escalated later that afternoon. As Ian walked away allegedly while mucking out her horses, Christine picked up a knife with a 12.5-inch blade and stabbed him once in the back. The blow punctured his lung. With the knife still embedded, Ian followed her for roughly 100 yards, pleading for help and asking her to remove it. She refused. He collapsed on the path leading to the stables. Christine eventually pulled the knife out and pushed it under a stable door before calling a friend not for assistance for Ian, but to ask them to care for her animals. Emergency responders arrived, but Ian was pronounced dead shortly after 3:15 in the afternoon. Christine was arrested that same day. Officers recalled her saying, "He was so cruel," and expressing fear that he would come and get her. Detectives from the Major Crime Investigation Team led an extensive inquiry. Evidence included her earlier text message, her phone call to her daughter saying, "I've stabbed him," and testimony describing years of volatile behavior within the marriage. Prosecutors also alleged that Christine had stabbed Ian twice in the past, once with a knife and once with a fork, though these incidents had not led to previous convictions. During the trial at Exeter Crown Court, Christine claimed she acted in self-defense after enduring years of abuse. He described Ian as controlling and narcissistic, and her defense presented her history of depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. The prosecution rejected this characterization, arguing that their relationship involved 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, and that Christine had a pattern of aggression. The jury unanimously found her guilty of murder. In March 2024, Christine received a life sentence with a minimum term of 17 years. The judge emphasized her ungovernable temper, the unexpected nature of the attack, and her failure to help her husband as he lay dying. Police extended condolences to Ian's family, expressing hope that the verdict would provide a measure of closure. The case did not spark widespread public debate, but within the community it drew attention to the often unseen dynamics of long-term domestic conflict. In the end, this tragedy shows how years of unresolved hostility can erupt in a single moment with irreversible consequences. Fifth offender, Jodie Swannick, 31 years old. December the 14th, 2020, Wembury, Devon. Sometimes, violence erupts not from planning, but from lives already spiraling out of control. Jodie Swannick, a 32-year-old woman with a long history of heroin addiction, unstable housing, and shoplifting offenses, had lived a chaotic life marked by exploitation and trauma. She once worked as a prostitute to fund her addiction and had been a victim of sexual violence. She had no fixed address, drifting between temporary accommodations. Her partner, 42-year-old Lee Chugg, shared a similar pattern of instability. Their victim, 60-year-old Stephen Fogg, was a vulnerable autistic man who volunteered at a local charity shop. He lived alone, known by neighbors for his gentleness and routine trips to the village store. Swannick and Chugg were acquaintances. Chugg lived above the shop Mr. Fogg visited daily, and the pair had been to his home before. On that December evening at around 9 o'clock, the pair, after drinking vodka and taking drugs, arrived at Mr. Fogg's home hoping to obtain alcohol or money. What followed was a 42-minute assault. Confined to the kitchen, the attack involved kicking and stamping using their shod feet as weapons. Swannick pressed her shoe into his face, leaving a distinct print behind. Mr. Fogg suffered 35 facial injuries, a fractured skull, a shattered jaw, and 27 rib fractures. He remained alive for at least 30 minutes, possibly still breathing when his attackers fled. Rather than calling for help, Swannick and Chugg rifled his pockets, fled the house, and hid in Plymouth. They remained at large for 8 days, until detectives tracked them down. The investigation, led by the Major Crime Investigation Team, was described as complex and evidence-heavy. CCTV, forensic shoeprint analysis, and expert testimony dismantled the pair's attempts to blame one another. Swannick admitted to kicking Mr. Fogg in the head 3 times, but the jury concluded the attack was a joint effort. The physical evidence left little doubt. Both took part, and both left a vulnerable man to die without assistance. In May 2022, at Exeter Crown Court, a jury found Swannick guilty of murder. The judge cited the brutality of the attack, The use of feet as weapons, the prolonged nature of the violence, and the defendant's callous indifference. He imposed a life sentence with a minimum term of 18 years. Chugg received a matching sentence. The reaction within the community was somber. Those who knew Mr. Fogg spoke of his kindness and quiet presence, describing him as someone who brought warmth to the people around him. Police expressed hope that the sentence would offer comfort and closure to those affected. The case did not spark national debate, but it left a lasting impression, locally highlighting the dangers faced by vulnerable adults living alone. In the end, the tragedy shows how vulnerability, neglect, and desperation can intersect with devastating consequences no one can undo. Sixth offender, Stacey Stripp, 29 years old. November 13th, 2017, Paynton, Devon. Some encounters begin as brief transactions, yet end in irreversible violence. Stacey Stripp, a 29-year-old homeless drug user from Exeter, lived on the margins of society. She drifted between hostels and acquaintances' homes, funding her crack cocaine habit through sex work and shoplifting. Locals at a nearby pub knew her as a woman trapped in addiction, instability, and desperation. 3 days before the killing, she met 71-year-old Peter Mason, a widower and retired soldier, who paid her for sex and later bought her drugs. On the evening of November the 13th, after smoking crack cocaine and drinking Jack Daniels, Stripp returned to Mr. Mason's flat. He had taken Viagra, and what followed was described in court as an eruption of overwhelming aggression. During a sudden confrontation, Stripp seized 2 large kitchen knives and stabbed him 13 times. One wound to his chest measured 19 centimeters deep. Another to his neck was delivered with what forensic experts called severe force. Mr. Mason, gravely injured, retreated from the lounge to the bathroom, carrying a small table in a desperate attempt to shield himself. He pleaded, "Stop it, stop it, stop it." But Stripp continued the attack. He collapsed in the bathroom, where he bled to death. Stripp fled immediately. In the following hour, she wandered the neighborhood, knocking on doors and inventing stories claiming she had been raped or suffered a miscarriage. One man refused her entry, and she punched him in the face. When police arrived, she was verbally abusive, spitting and shouting at officers. Bodycam footage captured her false insistence that she was 6 months pregnant and had been mishandled. A forensic-led investigation quickly reconstructed the sequence of events. Bloodstain analysis demonstrated that Mr. Mason was first attacked in the lounge before staggering into the bathroom. CCTV footage, recordings of Stripp buying drugs, and the bodycam footage of her arrest built a cohesive timeline. The overwhelming number of stab wounds and the use of 2 knives dismantled her claim of self-defense. She had argued Mr. Mason attempted to rape her, but prosecutors noted the evidence showed she was the aggressor in what they called a drug-fueled rage. At Exeter Crown Court in May 2018, the jury deliberated for less than an hour before finding her guilty of murder. The judge imposed a life sentence with a minimum term of 16 years. He accepted the attack was not pre-planned, but emphasized that the level of violence was entirely disproportionate and fueled by substance abuse. Community reaction was one of quiet shock. Mr. Mason's isolation, coupled with his vulnerability as an elderly widower seeking companionship, highlighted the risks faced by those who engage with individuals battling addiction and instability. While the case did not prompt national discussion, it left a lasting mark locally, especially among those who had known him as a gentle and lonely man. In the end, the crime reveals how dependence, desperation, and volatility can collide in a moment that destroys 2 lives forever. 11th offender, Lindsey Gabriel, 31 years old. September the 28th, 2018, Bugle, Cornwall. Jealousy can ignite slowly, until one moment turns a private argument into a deadly confrontation. Lindsey Gabriel, a 31-year-old mother from Bugle, lived with a volatile temper and underlying mental health issues. At the time, she was already on bail for 2 assault charges, one involving an attack on a taxi driver. Her relationship with 35-year-old James Field had lasted only 5 months, but it was marked by arguments, breakups, and accusations. Gabrielle believed he was cheating on her, and the tension between them simmered throughout the day. That morning, she accessed Mr. Field's Facebook account and discovered he had added several women. Enraged, she sent abusive messages and vandalized his car, painting the words "cheat" and "player" before having the vehicle towed away. Her 13-year-old son helped wrap the damaged car in paper. The vandalism provoked Mr. Field to come to her home that evening, where he kicked in the bottom panel of her front door. The crucial minutes were captured in a 999 call made shortly before 8 o'clock. On the recording, Mr. Field demanded to know where his car was, while Gabrielle repeatedly shouted, "Get out of my house," What happened next unfolded in less than a minute. Gabriel picked up a kitchen knife and stabbed him once in the chest with significant force. The blade pierced his ribs and entered his heart. Mr. Field staggered up the path, collapsed, and bled to death on the pavement. In the moments after the stabbing, Gabriel ran outside yelling that Mr. Field had a knife and had stabbed himself. Witnesses described her as the most aggressive person present, even as neighbors attempted to help the dying man. Police arrived and arrested her that evening. The investigation faced challenges because Gabriel refused to fully cooperate. Detectives instead relied on forensic evidence, the 999 audio, and the recovery of the murder weapon from a drain outside her home found by a police dog named Roscoe. Her claim that Mr. Field stabbed himself was dismissed by pathologists, who confirmed the nature and depth of the wound could not have been self-inflicted. In April 2019, at Truro Crown Court, a unanimous jury found her guilty of murder after fewer than 4 hours of deliberation. The judge highlighted her ungovernable temper, her intentional creation of a confrontation, and the absence of any justification for using such lethal force. She was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 14 years. If released, she will remain on license for life. Mr. Field's family described their loss as tragic, saying they would continually miss him every day, and thanked the police and members of the public who tried to save him. While the case did not spark national debate, it resonated locally as a devastating example of how jealousy and rage can escalate with irreversible consequences. In the end, the case shows how a single moment, born from anger, can destroy 2 families and alter countless lives. 8th offender, Jessica Stunnell, 47 years old. November the 23rd, 2019, Falmouth, Cornwall. Jealousy can simmer quietly for months, until one night it erupts with devastating force. Jessica Stunnell, a 47-year-old mother, grandmother, and long-respected employee, lived in Wood Lane, Falmouth. To those around her, she appeared stable and hard-working, a woman who had overcome a difficult background. But beneath that exterior lay a volatile emotional landscape shaped by a long, on-off relationship with Michael Cohen and a decades-long friendship with Faye Davies, the 2 people she would later stab in a frenzied attack. Mr. Cohen and Miss Davies had begun their relationship in April 2019. Stunnell struggled to accept it. Their breakup earlier that year had been followed by months of tension, arguments, and unresolved emotions. In the week leading up to the attack, Mr. Cohen stayed with Stunnell, sleeping in her bed and giving her the impression their relationship had reignited. What she believed was reconciliation ended abruptly on November the 23rd, when Mr. Cohen met her at a Wetherspoons pub and told her he was returning to Miss Davies. Outside the pub, Stunnell lashed out, punching him, putting him in a headlock, and biting his ear. Fueled by alcohol and cocaine, she sent a series of threatening messages, including, "I will end it for you," "I'm prepared, but you will be dead," and "It's war to both of you." Near midnight, she armed herself with a large kitchen knife and drove to Miss Davies' home in Windsor Court. At 11:45 that night, Mr. Cohen opened the door. Stunnell frantically thrust the knife into his chest while shouting, "I am going to kill you." He suffered 5 stab wounds, including a 7 to 8 centimeter deep strike directly over his heart. Miss Davies intervened, and Stunnell turned the weapon on her, stabbing her 4 times in the chest and breast, before leaving the 15 centimeter long knife embedded in her chest in the final wound. After fleeing, she arrived at Finn McCool's pub and told people, "I stabbed them. I know I shouldn't have done it, but it's been coming." Police found her blood-stained hoodie discarded in a bin. When taken into custody, she showed no remorse, telling an officer, "I wish the man was dead." Detectives built their case through CCTV footage of the earlier assault, forensic examination of the scene, and recovery of the knife missing from her kitchen set. Text messages documented her threats, establishing clear intent. Both victims survived, but were left with life-altering injuries. Mr. Cohen described reliving the attack repeatedly, while Miss Davies reported permanent scarring and fear of Stunnell's eventual release. In March 2020, at Truro Crown Court, Stunnell pleaded guilty to attempted murder, causing grievous bodily harm with intent, and possessing an offensive weapon. The judge cited the ferocity of the attack, the betrayal of a 25-year friendship, and her chilling lack of remorse. She received a 16-year prison sentence, with half to be served before parole eligibility. The community reacted with disbelief that a trusted and familiar woman had carried out such violence. The case echoed widely across Cornwall, highlighting how jealousy and emotional turmoil can escalate into catastrophic harm. In the end, this case shows how anger left unchecked can shatter relationships, families, and futures in a single night. 9th offender, Tanya Hoskin, 52 years old. December the 27th, 2020, Exmouth, Devon. Some arguments flare, cool, and pass, but others ignite in one irreversible second. Tanya Hoskin, a 52-year-old former cafe and holiday park worker, lived with her partner, 54-year-old Nigel Johnston, in Tennyson Way. Their relationship stretched back decades. They married in 1989, separated in 1993, and reunited 7 years before the killing. In recent years, Hoskin had become his full-time carer as his health declined. Neighbors described her as feisty and volatile, while psychiatric experts later confirmed she suffered from complex post-traumatic stress disorder and emotionally unstable personality disorder, rooted in severe childhood trauma. On the night of December the 27th, the couple had been drinking pink gin during the Christmas lockdown. Their argument escalated throughout the evening. Earlier, Hoskin had secretly recorded Mr. Johnston admitting he had previously strangled her, and at 8:55 she phoned her sister, complaining he was getting on her last nerve. During that call, her sister heard the tapping of a knife on a worktop seconds before Mr. Johnston said he was bleeding. In the kitchen, Hoskin seized a large carving knife and delivered a single, forceful stab to his chest. The blade penetrated 22 centimeters, slicing through his ribs and severing his portal vein. As he collapsed, he told her, "It is all right, I don't blame you." Hoskin ran to a neighbor for help, returned to administer CPR, and sobbed apologies while clinging to him. Paramedics arrived, but Mr. Johnston was pronounced dead at 9:50. Police bodycam footage captured Hoskin distraught at the scene, but her mood shifted radically once in Exeter custody. She became verbally abusive, punched an officer in the face, and kicked 2 others. She later admitted 4 counts of assaulting emergency workers. The Major Crime Investigation Team conducted a detailed investigation, drawing on the secret audio recording, the phone call to her sister, forensic analysis, and psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Bradley Hillier testified that Hoskin's disorders affected her emotional regulation and memory, though the jury ultimately rejected her defense that she acted in self-defense or from diminished responsibility. Prosecutors argued she acted in drunken anger and frustration, picking up the knife and striking in a single, violent motion. In March 2022, at Exeter Crown Court, the jury acquitted her of murder, but convicted her of manslaughter. The judge described the stabbing as sudden, unexpected, wholly unwarranted, and grossly disproportionate. He dismissed claims that her mental disorders significantly reduced her culpability and imposed a 10-year prison sentence. She must serve at least half before being considered for parole. Mr. Johnston's family expressed grief and anger, describing him as a good, kind man whose loss left a gaping hole in their lives. Although they found the verdict difficult, they acknowledged it offered some form of closure. Ultimately, this tragedy shows how a single impulsive act, born from anger and pain, can carve a permanent divide between love, loss, and accountability. Final offender, Tia Taylor, 22 years old. April the 30th, 2023, Bodmin, Cornwall. Sometimes, violence erupts not from intention, but from one chaotic moment that spins beyond control. Tia Taylor, a 22-year-old mother of 2 from Bodmin, found herself pulled into a deadly street brawl outside the Eclipse nightclub in the early hours after closing. Though not the person who wielded the knife, she became known for her role in the manslaughter of 32-year-old rugby player Michael Ridio Allen, a man attempting to act as a peacemaker. Taylor showed genuine remorse and used her time in custody to study and work, but the consequences of that night remain irreversible. The confrontation began shortly after 3 o'clock. Taylor, her friend Chelsea Powell, and Jake Hill had been drinking before joining a crowd of around 15 people arguing in the street. Hill strode to a hedge, retrieved a serrated hunting knife he had hidden before entering the nightclub, and charged towards the fight. In a span of 20 to 30 seconds, he stabbed 5 people. Mr. Ridio Allen stepped forward, trying to separate the groups and disarm Hill. While he knelt defensively on the ground, attempting to stop further harm, Taylor repeatedly punched him in the head. Her blows left him unable to protect himself as Hill delivered the fatal stab wound to his abdomen. Mr. Ridio Allen died at the scene. The trio fled to Taylor's house. Hill attempted to hide the knife first, trying to flush it down a toilet, then stuffing it into a kitchen vent. When armed officers arrived around 6:30 that morning, Taylor lied repeatedly, insisting Hill was not there. It was her young child who ultimately revealed he was hiding in the loft, from which Hill fell and was arrested. The Major Crime Investigation Team launched what detectives described as an incredibly complex and challenging investigation. Hours of CCTV footage were reviewed to identify the sequence of events. Forensic teams recovered the hidden knife, both Taylor and Powell were exposed for providing false information intended to hinder the investigation. During the 6-week trial, Taylor changed her plea to guilty of manslaughter and perverting the course of justice. On April 12, 2024, at Truro Crown Court, Taylor received a 3-year prison sentence. She will serve half before release on license. The judge condemned her decision to join the violence and later lie to officers, stating it set a poor example for her children. Mr. Ridio Allen's family described their grief as all-encompassing, saying their lives would never be the same. They expressed that the verdict was not a victory, only a painful reminder of the devastation caused by one knife. Their campaign against knife crime now seeks to prevent others from experiencing the same loss. As this tragedy demonstrates, chaotic moments can escalate with shocking speed, leaving permanent consequences. Moments of chaos can pull anyone into danger, even those with no intent to cause harm. Walking away from a violent crowd is often the only safe choice. Never protect someone with lies. Evidence will expose the truth, and the consequences can outlast the crime itself. And when a knife appears, distance is survival, not cowardice. And in those brief seconds, one decision can divide a life forever before anyone realizes the damage cannot be undone. When stories like this come to an end, they leave more than a courtroom judgment behind. They leave questions. How many lives change in a single moment? How many warnings go unnoticed until it's too late? Here on UK Real Crime, we'll continue uncovering the cases that shape our understanding of danger, trust, and the choices people make in the shadows. If you want to be the first to watch our next investigation, make sure you subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new case the moment it drops. And now, we'd like to hear from you. Which real UK criminal cases should we cover next? Your suggestions drive this channel forward, helping us reveal the stories that must not be forgotten. Stay vigilant, stay curious, and stay with UK Real Crime.